You know what did she say?
Testing from the soul.
Sorry? Come from the door. Not bad. My mom just looked at me and then say, That was when I realized, basically she said, I was actually from the trash can. Just don't ask any further. Sex education. Thank God I didn't go to the trash can to look for babies. Who knows? Maybe I'll be able to get one. Regardless of whatever it is, it took me a while before I realized what's happening. At the age of 18, that was when we, in Malaysia during that period of time, can basically then rent VHS. How many of you still remember the VHS? Yes. Now I know how old you are. I think most of us will know the VHS. If you don't know that, basically it's just a DVD in a thicker version like a chocolate. So I rented the VHS because only 18 then we have our Malaysian ID. I went there and then I rented it out. So before I went there, my friend who basically had his birthday in January told me this, you're gonna rent that? That's exciting. And so I did. So on the VHS shop, I looked at the title, I was like, okay. I just borrowed it, went back home. Now because I was 18, Form 5, you know, any Asian parents, no TV. And that's at the same time, it was weekdays. So what did I do? TikTok, 9, TikTok, 10, TikTok, 11. My parents were all asleep. I basically then took the VHS out from my school bag. I crept into the TV room, I pressed the VHS in, and then I pressed the play button.
Really?
That's when I actually had my first sex education. I was literally like, ooh, wow. I was so intrigued by the whole scene until I realized that there was actually someone standing next to the TV. I looked at that someone. Shit! I pressed the play button, so I paused the button, I looked at the TV. That someone looked at me. Look at the TV. I look at that someone. And you know what my dad did?
Watch together.
No! My dad, literally then, came down, sat with me, pressed the play button, and I watched it with my dad. So how cool was my dad? We watched it for a while. My dad basically around like 5 minutes, a bit more. My dad literally then raised up, we got stood up, looked at me, and then just say one thing. I think your mom is better. I was like, Dad, TMI, I don't want to know. Regardless of whatever it is, that was when I realized, sex education. Alright, that was fine. Moving on to many years, my nephew just got 18 last year. Sorry, this year itself. And so, being an uncle, being someone from a very traditional family, I decided to then not be too traditional. That's also partially because I'm also a bit more westernized in that sense.
Internet.
So I sat my nephew down, telling him this. Boy, you are almost 18. It's time for me to tell you something. My nephew, being my nephew, just looked at me and then saying, I kind of know what you're talking about. If you're going to be talking about that, then nah, I've watched it. I was like, what? Where? Which era are you living in now? I say, the internet era. And which era were you living now? The VHS era. That was when I realized something as well. In this age and technology, there are a lot of things floating on the internet. And at the end of the day, we got to realize change perceptions as well. So what's the whole moral of the story, you might then ask? The moral basically is very simple. It's actually a real situation where I then talked to my nephew. I just realized this as well. It's always good to prepare them in advance because with the fast information of technology and the internet, a lot of things are floating around. Instead of letting them being able to venture on their own, talk to them. There is no harm than talking to them before some accidents happens. And the last thing I want is to be